Kev, what's up, brother?
Man, living the life. Good to see you. We looking the same now.
Yeah, I got a little Papa Smurf thing going on here. So I saw your incredible journey Far East. Where were you? Like Afghanistan, India, Pakistan? I mean, that was crazy what you did.
Oh, that was that was 2 years ago. That was what we did was it was kind of heavy, man. There was a guy in Humboldt named Doug Furr, and Douglas went over to Pakistan in the early '80s. And when he went there for was at that time most of the cannabis grown in America was really narrow leaf drug cultivars, and so camp would raid you like October, November. And what he realized was that if he could find earlier flowering varieties, he would be able to get a crop in prior to the raids. So he goes to Pakistan, and goes to Islamabad, gets a hold of some farmers from Tira Valley, which is this legendary hemp production region, brings it back to California. And it was really he was like one of the true pioneers of bringing broadleaf varieties into the United States. So he wasn't the only one, but without question, he was probably the only one that shared the material. So I get invited to go to Pakistan with a bunch of Pakistani individuals who were trying to bring some attention to Pakistan, because after 9/11, the country just got decimated in terms of like embargoes and no tourism. And they were like, man, they go, it's a beautiful country and we're good people. And they said, if Kev, if you came and hung with us and checked out the area, we'd be able to get some positive press. And I said, hey, that'd be great. And then I went and talked to Doug, and Doug laid out the trip that he had taken. So I hit up the guys in Pakistan and said, hey, why don't we rewalk the footsteps of Doug Furr?
Damn.
And so we took the Silk Route. And the Silk Route is really what kind of developed the world. It was the relationship between Asia and Europe. And the Silk Route even goes back like 100,000 years that we can see. And it was really where they believed that the hominoids and the Neanderthals merged because of climate change. So people would move from one place to the other due to drought or excessive rain, heat, whatever climate was, non-conducive to human living. And so this route through the Karakura Mountains, Hindu Kush, and Himalayas had been established millennia ago, and it became this stabilized trade route under Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan stabilizes the route, and it creates it. And when the Byzantine Empire sealed off that trade route, it's what spurred Columbus to try to circumnavigate and find how to get to Asia to get the spice. Which really, and then he gets lost, he finds the United States or North America, and it begins the whole sweeping colonization. But it was heavy to walk on a trail that had basically developed so much of our modern world, and to be able to go explore all the culture and the especially for me, the cannabis culture that existed forever. So like, you go to a village and you're talking to a guy that's making hash, and you ask him, how long you been making hash? And he said, well, shit, my first memories of me being like 2 or 3 would be with my dad making hash. And I'm like, how long did your dad make hash? And he goes, same thing his whole life. And he goes, we've been in the village for 1,800 years. We've always made hash. We've always been involved with cannabis because it was here long before we ever got here. So you kind of really understand the infancy of the North American cannabis industry, and how we kind of believe that we pioneered anything. And so it was humbling because their sharing of the material, farmers don't hoard stock, they share it freely. The genes move, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, all those regions, the flow of material constantly moving and shaping, because at the end of the day, it was about survivability. It was a food source, it was a medicine, and it was a spiritual aid. So to kind of understand how we developed a culture that we really don't understand here because of the drug war, and to walk the footsteps of Alexander the Great, and to be in the Karakura Mountains, which the most well-known mountain in the Karakura Range is K2. There's no word for the scale. Like it's the only thing I could really relate to was being on the open ocean. If you've ever been out in the open ocean, right, where you're like 1,000 miles from land in any direction, there's an immensity to it that's beyond description. And it lets you feel minuscule. And when you're in those ranges, you get to really understand that minuscularity. And it lets you understand why the people are so gracious to each other as visitors and guests. Because if you weren't, you could starve to death and die. And I got to experience that in that trip. And it was just an absolute unbelievable experience. The people that we were with were lovely. And every village we went to, everywhere we went, we were treated like family. It was just really next level humanity education. You would have loved it, Leighton. You would have loved it.
You know, it reminds me of the trip I took to Venezuela. Didn't speak any Spanish, didn't know anybody. There was a breakout in Manaus, Brazil, so they canceled all the flights. So I basically got trapped in Caracas, and this family just brought me in and fed me and let me sleep in their house. And it was just like, whoa, this is such a culture shock from America. It's just right.
It blows your mind. We think we have it right because we have technology. What we've done is we've replaced humanity with technology. And it was just such a revelation to be, you're climbing up the side of a mountain, you crawl into someone's ranch, their farm, and the villagers come out and they see you, and then they hadn't seen a white person in, 20, 25 years, right? And they're just like, holy shit.
Where'd you come from?
The first thing they say to you is, hey, that's our favorite apple tree. I'm with other Pakistanis so they could translate, but they're like, hey, that's our favorite apple tree. Go gather all the apples, and while you're doing that, I'll go in the house and get you a bag of fresh nuts and dried fruit, and we'll make tea. And if you had done that in the United States, you wander into somebody's yard, you're liable to get shot. So, I mean, it was so. And what do they say? There's a phrase I learned when I was studying anthropology. It was called the noble savage syndrome, where we always say that people that live these pure lives are purer. But this wasn't the noble savage syndrome. It was purely a response to living in an environment that forces you to coexist in a way, kind of like the way the Polynesians existed on the oceans. So the Polynesians, being the master navigators, celestial navigators they were moving constantly among all the island chains. And so they would put, everybody on board these big double outrigger canoes, and they would sail 1,000 miles. And you had to learn how to get along on that vessel and be part of the process. And I got lucky that I got to spend so much time with Polynesians as friends and partners that let me understand differently how they operate in this acceptance of shared load, and how, for whatever reason in our world, it's to not share the load. It's to dump it on someone else and then be like, that's what bosses do. We tell people what to do. And in these other societies, there's clearly leadership taking place, but the leadership functions and acts in a really normal manner. So it was a beautiful experience, man. It was. And what was fascinating too was, to tie it into soil, was that I'll never forget, like when Josh turned me on to Elaine, right? So we all get together to be part of the regenerative conference, and I get to hang out with Elaine, and she came by my shop to talk about differences between aerobic and anaerobic thresholds and how we really define it. And it was a statement she made about all soil indexes on Earth can provide life as long as we can cover it to cool it and bind it so it doesn't blow away in particulate form. She said that was like the miracle of compost tea, was his glue agent. And she said with some compost to cover and something to bind, a plant can survive. And so you're looking at cannabis in this unbelievably high calcium soil that's fundamentally as mineral rich as any soil on planet Earth, but almost no humus. And you got to see how plants adapted, and you got to see how they worked with no humidity because there's no rain, right? So I just couldn't understand it was funny. You don't understand how there can be so much water, which is the Indus River, but how can there be no rain? It's because you're in the mountains, and so it's snowfall and it's glacier, and it's the melting glaciers, and it's the glaciers as they melt and grind and scrape, they mineralize the runoff, and almost everything there is completely glacial fed. So the water is moving through these glacial flows, but there's no atmospheric moisture. So it's fascinating to see plants and how they respond, and why you see such an unbelievable level of like trike development and the very unique natures of the metabolite development in relation to the location. So the plants that were around pomegranate had a very different aroma set than the ones that were around the potato fields. So you could go from farm to farm to farm, and you could see the impact of the native plants around it and the cultivated plants around it, and how it impacted the crops in these really fascinating ways, but mechanisms of uptake that was super efficient. And it created a different plant. Like when you grabbed the plant itself and pulled it through your hand, it was almost like you were grabbing shark skin. It would tear the skin off of you. You couldn't break the branches off. Like the resiliency and the ruggedness of the material, because you didn't have excessive nitrogen to create extra fast growth. So the herbaceousness of the growth was far less, and what you got was fundamentally semi-hardwood through the whole, the whole thing, except for hardwood at the stem. And it was fascinating, Leighton. Like if for someone that's a soil nut, to experience this level of fertility and to see the quality of the products that came out of it was mind-bending.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Driven.
I can only imagine, and that description of how the plants take on their surroundings. I mean, remember in Michigan when we were talking about the different cherry strains, and why aren't they growing them in the cherry fields or with cherry bark or with any of the the offshoots or plants trimmings, and what the benefits could be. And so it's kind of cool to hear that again we were talking, we kind of knew it would work, but again having multiple examples of how the indigenous environment around them affect these plants in a very profound way.
It was amazing. And the thing is, when you're in Pakistan, Afghanistan, you're not smoking flower. Well, oddly enough, flower is like illegal. Hash is okay, but flower is frowned on. But the thing is that the flower basically can't be smoked because it desiccates so quickly, and the plants were never selected for flower consumption, right? So the plant material itself is just basically a vehicle. It's all resin. And the way they approach the impact of the high is they off-gas what we seek. We seek heavy petroleum type, heavy chemical type aromas because it's so crippling, and America's obsessed with it. But I asked them, I said, whoa, how come all this has been gassed off? And they're like, it will get too high. It's deadly. We'll fall off the edge of the mountain, because you're literally on the side of the mountain. And it was so funny because it was so honest. But what I experienced was flavors in hash that you almost never experience unless we're talking about like a fresh frozen rosin, where we've captured all these delicate citruses and florals. The hash was laden with it. And it was amazing on how they did it in such a simple manner, where basically they harvest it and leave it in the cold and the snow. And it just allows the off-gassing of a lot of the volatiles that we find critical to capture. For them, it's a masking agent and an intoxicant, and they let it leave. And when we broke open all the hash, because as soon as I got there, they had 500 grams for us to smoke. So I said, we're going to hash? He said, yeah, we got half a key. And I laughed, and I said, oh, this is going to be a good trip. It was 5 different 100-gram samples from different farmers that my friend Sabir had gathered. He's from the Afridi tribe, which is the tribe that really colonizes Tira. So an ancient tribe of people. He's the one that went back to his homeland in Tira and gathered up all the killer hash for us to smoke. And when we're breaking it open, the aromas pouring out of it were incredible, because I never smelled that in traditional hash. And I was amazed at what happens when you follow their process of off-gassing and allowing all these other subtle compounds to come out that are masked by these dominant compounds. And what was cool too was it was the appreciation for whole crop products. So like we get all caught up in like whole plant, right, versus an isolate, right? We're always like isolate's bad, whole plant's better. Try whole crop, where what you get is an array of cannabinoids and other metabolites that's so diverse that everyone that we smoked with, so there was like 15, 18 of us hanging out, we were all happy with the buzz. And we were all commenting on it. And I said, holy shit, it's because we're all getting something within that spectrum that makes us happy, because there's so many spectrums being displayed. And for us now, we go so narrow focused that some people, you know, either love a product or hate it, but we notice without question. And it wasn't like, you know, you can say set and setting is a big deal, and it is, but you know, you got a month to hang out and smoke. It kind of surpasses like a set and setting situation. It's just this, holy shit, this is interesting. And then the fermentation where we got to smoke the goat ball hash, and some Americans were in horror. They couldn't believe that I was smoking this contaminated product. And I'm like, no, they're not live testicles. They take the balls off the goat, clean it out, dry it, and it just forms a leather bag, right?
Yeah.
But because of that being an organic material, it harbors bacteria. That bacteria works in conjunction with the hash, almost like they figured out in Africa how to cob and ferment the product. It's not so much a profound fermentation process because it's the resin, but it brought out these subtleties and nuances that were crazy. And every time we got in the car, I'm like, who's got the goat ball hash?
So I was going to ask you, I mean, did you have to wrestle with the high, or was it just not like a couch lock?
No, God, no. It was, the best way I could put it would be beautiful warm blanket, where you put it on and you just felt serene. And the hash, the tea, and the prayer all kind of go together in a symbiosis, where you have, and each session has a name. They've named them depending on what they are through the morning to the night. And you're giving prayer to say, and it's funny because we know we talk about religious extremism, but until you get into a landslide and see a mountain come down around you, you don't quite appreciate spirituality. So like we're cruising over the Karakoram, and we come around the corner. We're talking like 3,000-4,000 feet straight down on the side of the road, right? It's the Karakoram Highway is like one of the most ungodly freeways ever created in human history. And when you look over the side, you can't believe they carved that shit in a mountain. So we come around the corner, and it's all this white dust. And I'm like, damn, I'm thinking, this isn't, let me take this thing off, it's driving me nuts. I'm thinking, oh, they're doing road construction, but who would do road construction like that on such a dangerous road? So we stop, and all the dust clears, and we look, and a rock the size of a refrigerator had just fallen off the edge of the mountain and had landed on top of a wheelbarrow and crushed it into powder like 2 microseconds before we got there. So if we had got there a little earlier and been 3 foot over to the right, man, that shit would have taken me right out. And it was just like, holy shit. So we're thinking like, all right, that's like a rare phenomenon. So we keep cruising, and we get into a whole landslide and taking out a section of the road. And the Pakistanis all say, hey, I mean, they get out of their cars and go, together we'll clear the road. And all of a sudden, every single person, 100 cars full of people, start clearing the road by hand so they can get the cars through. And as they're clearing it, me and the camera guy, this guy Raul that we were rolling with, we're walking, and we hear this little ding 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 ding, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And I see little rocks flying, and we look up, and it's the mountain coming down, and Raul became an Olympic sprinter. The camera footage is hysterical because he's got the camera on, and we're running for our lives so that we don't get killed. And I got my hand up over my face so that it won't hit me in the head. And I'm laughing because the rocks are the size of like cantaloupe and shit now. They were pebbles, now they're cantaloupes. They're about to be refrigerators. And we're running for our lives so that we don't get killed in this slide. And there's this phrase they use continuously in Pakistan, and it's inshallah. and it means if God wills it. And you hear it all the time, and I didn't understand the significance of it until that damn slide. And I realized that when you're living in these places that was so savage, there has to be an acceptance for this balance of life and death and for higher power. So however we define spirituality, they embraced it. And the T is a moment to take time to share. The cannabis helps you clear. The prayer lets you say thanks. And so I got to watch, a really beautiful cycle of respect for life in that process. And it was just really profound, man. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced in my life. And I learned really what Hindu Kush meant. Hindu Kush means Hindu killers, because in the Hindu mountains, the people that came down, the bandits, were called the Hindu Kush. They were the Hindu killers. And so it's funny, but you start to like, all of a sudden I realized, why do they call the herb the kill? Where'd that come from? Where'd that phrase come from? What's the etymology of these words? And when you learn that Hindu Kush actually stands for Hindu killers, you're like, whoa, the kill coming from the Killer Mountain.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother level of respect, because the environment requires it. Like
it's mandatory. If you ever, like I said, if you've ever been out in the open ocean, right? Once you get out in deep water, right, where you're like, you're 20,000 feet, right? It's 20,000 foot of water underneath you, right? And you're like, I used to work in it, right? I tell people, I said, oh, it is a difference when you're in the big pond. Like, it's one thing to be in the boat, it's another to be in the water. You realize the immensity of it and how insignificant you are. And I think that that's a really important thing for us as human beings, is that we don't take ourselves so seriously, that we're so unbelievably important in the big picture, that we're critical and crucial in the small picture, to your friends, family, to the things you're involved in. But on a bigger scope, we're just dust in the wind. And it allows you to be able to have a different respect for the natural world around you. And it makes you want to leave a more gentle step, because you realize that you're not in charge. Once you mess around with anything natural at a scale, you're not in charge. Just like the East Coast right now in New England, and getting smashed with the blizzard, right? Where they banned all travel and all this other shit. When that's happening, nobody's in charge.
Yeah.
So it was just really humbling. And the people that we traveled with, they were all natural born Pakistanis, but they had all emigrated to the UK because Pakistan had gone through that entire issue with the 9/11 shit, right? And they grow up and they become successful, younger men in their own regard, but they have a love affair with their homeland, and they wanted to come back and start to be able to develop tourism. And it was heavy, because everywhere I went, I was so unbelievably white that people came up to me wherever I went, and they would walk up to me and they would look at me like, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm exploring your country. And they were like, and you're having a good time? And I said, I'm having the best time. And I'm like, and I'm going to tell people that it was wonderful, and that, that the hospitality was phenomenal. And it almost made a lot of these older people almost like emotional, because it was this vindication of, we were all labeled terrible people because of governmental dispute.
Dude.
And we become critical of every culture. And I talked about it, and everyone's like, God, they do all this weird shit. And I'm laughing, and I'm like, you realize I'm American, right? So, like, be really clear when we talk about doing weird shit. Like, America definitely isn't immune to doing weird shit. So who am I to judge? And what it did is it allowed me to be able to experience a beauty in a way that was profound. And I'll always be thankful to the Land Race Genetics crew for the level of effort and camaraderie and just diligence that they put forth to make that experience so phenomenal. And I think we traveled 3,000 kilometers. I mean, we went this huge loop all the way up through those mountains and then back down, so we could see all the impacts. And what blew my mind more than anything, I think, was the fact that I was getting to see wild cannabis. uncultivated cannabis that was there naturally, had been there for millennia, thousands and thousands of years. You know, it had been swept in from China, Mongolia, settled there. And you get to see what it looks like without human intervention. And you're like, whoa, there is like nothing on the plant except big trike heads and just insane aroma, but basically completely adaptable to the wild kingdom it was in, because it had to work with where it was deposited. So it had water, low fertility, extremely difficult circumstances, high level of survivability, and the populations fluctuated, 50-50 purple-green. And it was really like the purple is what you discover as a survivability response. That anthocyanin, those pigments are critical for like almost like antifreeze. And so even though the people prefer green cannabis because they like the chemotype better, they always make sure there's this 50-50 distribution, so they have stuff that will survive regardless, because for the majority of people in those regions, cannabis is a food source first. They all grow bag and bag. The seeds were, they were growing, burlap sacks of them, because it's what gives them protein and omegas in the winter. And when we're talking like the winter in the Himalayas, you're talking 4 months of being socked in. And there's no wood, there's no trees, right? So they're having to basically put their animals under the house in like these subterranean barns so that the heat of the animals heats the floor. Yep. So like holy shit, the struggle's real. And we were there, in September, October, to correspond with the harvest. But man, when I was up on like Khyber Pass, which is like 14,000 feet, this wind came through, and that shit cut through your coat like a razor, man. Like and I laughed because it wasn't even winter yet, and you're just thinking like, holy shit, the seed is life. And you can understand why they brought seed with them wherever they traveled, and how when they ate the seed and didn't chew it up, they shit it out, and it's now deposited in a nice little fertilizer source, seed that fell out of the bag and the birds picked up and didn't break down and shit out. And you start to understand the distribution of cannabis in a way that until you see it, you just don't really understand. And it made me realize just how little, which I love. I really love learning how little I know. Yep.
And you know what, you said something that tripped me out, and I hadn't thought about it for a long time. So that same trip in Venezuela, I finally got out of Caracas and I went down to the Amazon because I really wanted to see what that was like.
Ooh, it's wild, huh?
Oh, dude, crazy shit. So
yeah, no, the Amazon is different, just like the Pampas, where you get into the Amazon and you get into the areas where the Spanish burned down oceans of it so they could have cattle colonization. But the problem was it's wetlands. And so it becomes, after a couple, 300-400 years, it becomes grasslands, but swamplands.
I know.
You get to see the turtles, the different birds.
The environment is crazy.
Everything. A recolonization, but in a new form. And then you get to the actual youngest, the actual rainforest itself, and you're just like, holy shit, man. We're talking about a level of life.
So have you been there?
I've been in the rainforest a couple of times in Colombia.
Okay, all right. Well, then you know what I'm talking about.
I went all the way up Rio Negro, which separates parts of Venezuela and Colombia, and then we went all the way up into the rainforest itself to go look at some projects. And this group had picked up like 2 million acres, and I want to say 800,000 of the acres were botanical preserve. And so we wanted to go see this 800,000 acres that would never be touched in any capacity. And you go out to the Amazon, and there was a river flowing through, and there was piles of fish scale, like 2 to 3 feet high, on this rock where the giant river otters would come and eat every day. So you got pink dolphin, you got river otters the size of seals, you got all the deadly shit. So like the Amazon is same thing. It's like the redwood, the Humboldt, man. It's so unique. that until you take pictures, but it doesn't matter.
No, you can't explain it. You
No, you
cannot
can't.
explain
You're in a place that is so alive and so filled with shit that wants to eat you or bite you or sting you or kill you. Like, holy fuck.
Fucking insects are out of control.
Oh, dude, I look like I had a plague. People were like, what happened to you? And I said, bro, I got hammered. And I come home from Colombia another time, and I got hit by some spider bites, and I got these bites on me. And everywhere I go, I get smashed by something. But
dude, did you get hit? Right. Did you get hit with the polies? They're like,
oh yeah, the little micro, but yes.
Right, and then they get the little red dot, and if you don't,
we didn't know that was going to happen, so we think that they're like gnats, right? They attack us. So I had short sleeve shirts on. I counted them. I had over like 60 bites just on my thumb area. So I might have had like 1,000 bites total on my arms. The Colombian architect, his face and the back of his neck just got ravaged. And the other Colombian dude, they flew up his shorts and stung him in his ass and his crotch, right? Oh. And we're all sitting there just realizing that we have a real problem because we're covered in this shit. And I'm over there like, my arms are killing me. And the architect's like, fuck, look at my head. And my other partner, Nicholas looks at us and he's like, bro. And he pulls down his shorts and we're just like, oh my God, they flew up your shorts and bit you in the sack. That shit, I tell people, I said, it's a bug the size of a pencil dot with the mouth of a great white shark.
Dude, and it's fucking toxic. That's like, if you get...
It didn't leave me. When I got home, it was funny because I put calamine lotion all over my arms to try. Went to the pharmacy and said, oh, I need some antihistamines. I said, this shit is killing me. So they give me some calamine lotion too, and I put it all over me. So it looks like I'm pink, right? And I sit down and we're flying around in an airplane, and I sit down next to this gal who just happens to be sitting next to me in the airplane, right? Like passenger shit. And as she's looking at me, I move and my arms flex and the calamine cracked. And it exploded off of my arms, and all you saw was all these like leaking, oozing sores. This woman jumped out of her chair and pointed at me like I had leprosy, and she screamed in Spanish to the stewardesses, and everybody's freaking out. And I'm laughing so hard because I'm trying to explain to them they're bug bites, but nobody wants to hear that shit, right? And so they segregated me in my own little section, and we flew. So I'm like, okay, that's all right. So I get home and I fly into the local airport and I bump into 2 or 3 of my friends at the airport, and they walk up to me and they see me and they jump back and they're like, what happened to you? And I said, oh, I got attacked by these little bugs that ripped me up. And they're like, no, that's not bug bites. You have some disease. And I'm trying to talk to them and they're backing up, and I'm laughing because I'm like, no, I'm pretty clear what happened.
Dude,
that shit didn't clear up for like 6 months. It looked like I'd been shot with a shotgun for 6 months.
My experience was this, all right? So I ended up living with a tribe of Indians down there, which was just fucking amazing. Like, I didn't speak Spanish. The guy I was with spoke Spanish. We picked up an Indian who had broken his leg a year and a half earlier and had been dragged to a missionary or a monastery to get healed. So he spoke Indian and he wanted to go back to his tribe. So Johnny's like, well, hey, let's take him to his tribe. You want to see the fucking Amazon, kid? I'll fucking take you to the Amazon. So we drove the car as far as we could, trail ended, we're hiking in. I got fucking nailed by those polies, dude. Like you. Like all over I wasn't wearing a shirt. All right.
Yeah, you don't know. You think they're gnats. You don't realize that they're biting you.
Dude, listen to this. This was fucking January. So I'm white. Like I'm white, like ghost-like color, right?
I'm that color every day.
Yeah. so dude, like these bumps, they just stood out all over my body. So we get to the tribe, right? And the guy introduced me to the chief, and the chief is like, what are you doing here? Like you're fucking scaring all the women and children. They're all hiding. They think you're deaf. And look at you, you're covered with fucking bites. Dude, you're gonna, this is going back and forth between 4 iterations before it gets to me in English, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea what the fuck's going on. But then they're finally like, all right, lay down on the ground and don't move. And I got attacked by women and kids, popping every one of those little fucking zits. Because I had what you had. Because once they get infected, they look like bullet holes. Like
they look wicked. Yeah, no. We were able to go. We finished the job. and we take the fucking boat basically back up river 6 hours. And as soon as we got into that first little town, I was like, there's got to be a pharmacist somewhere. And I walked in, and the pharmacist looked at me and said, "Holy shit!"
You're
and
fucked.
he just gave me a whole series of like creams and topicals, but it didn't heal for like 6 months. Like, I almost wondered if it was forever. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, this shit's never going to go away. And it's funny because when you're around the natives, they're so fully dressed. There's no skin exposed. And then they have this weird black shit that they make that they fucking smear on them. Kind of like Eskimos. Eskimos have this fish oil, like charcoal-y shit they use to keep the gnats away. And it smells like holy fucking hell. And you're thinking, no, I don't want to use that. If I had to go back up into that jungle again, I'd be bathing in that shit. I don't think people have any clue. Like, I mean, there's no level of insect attack I've ever experienced. I ran through a fire ant nest when I was a kid in the Everglades, right? I used to go visit my relatives in the Everglades, and I didn't know that it was a fire ant nest because you're playing, right? And all of a sudden, this shit's over my whole body, and they're pouring into my pants, and they're biting me everywhere, and you run home, and you're screaming, and my aunt puts me like into a bathtub, is pouring alcohol over me to kill it all off, and you were like, whew, that's okay. It was horrific, but you're okay. And then I've got into bee attacks where you got like, 10, 11 bees biting you at once, and you get stung all over the place, and I'm like, okay, you're all right.
Yeah.
That shit lasts a day. This stuff, it didn't go away for 6 months. I looked like it wasn't my face, thank God, or otherwise I would put a mask on. I would have scared people. But it was from my arm to my wrist on both sides were absolutely covered and looked like leprosy. And the histamines were pushing out through the wound, and it was creating like all those little scabbers that then snap off and leak. So you're just leaking and weeping, and you're swollen, and this shit hurts, and it's itchy. And
you can't itch it. If you itch it, you make it worse.
It makes it worse, right? I mean, and we're working on a project. We're like, just fuck it, we'll accept it. But me and the Colombian architect he was fascinating, man. He said, I work with the concept of space, but I'm a student of the concept of time. And he was fascinated with celestial movement and all the information that had been taken from the Mexicans, who really figure out the celestial movement and create the calendar that then was adopted into South America. And he was brilliant architect, but it was his appreciation for his heritage and the appreciation for understanding celestial movement and markings of time and passage. And he was a character. So then between me, him, and this cat named Nicholas, who was with us, and Nicholas was a Colombian breeder out of Cali. So he's like from the drier section. And they had brought him in so we could study the acclimatization of his varieties in these moister climates, so we could figure out what to do. And what was killer too, Leighton, was that it was so far up and out of the ordinary. There was no way to bring in any normal agricultural inputs. And what they had figured out forever ago, and it was funny because someone said to me, oh, they studied Korean natural farming. And I said, no, it's Colombian natural farming. They figured out how to do fermentation on their own. They're not getting literature from Dr. Cho, right? They're not studying, and they don't have the sugar or the potato to use. They were using other products to create the sugar source, and they were putting fields of plants together that they would then ferment and utilize for their nutrient sources. It was amazing. It was, and anytime you go to play, it's funny because we always westernize, and Dr. Cho's not Western, but we kind of popularized the methodologies of the Korean natural farming procedures. But it's almost like we invented all of this. And I laugh, and I'm just like, we didn't invent any of this.
No,
we did the work. Really, we did the worst job of anyone in adoption, because we had major military industry, petrochemical, ammonium nitrate reserves that we had to turn into money. So we went into this petrochemical driven agricultural methodology with commercialization. And that's what we all basically were raised on. And guys like you were, really powerful in trying to say, look, there's better methods and sustainable methods and better for all parties involved. That if we don't kill the ground we're working on, it's probably a good process. And when you allow plants to function from an exudate driven system, they're balanced in how they function, so their resistance is without question better. They're never loaded up with excessive nutrients, which make them attractive to pathogens.
So, dude, listen, there's this woman out of Colorado State U, Cartufa. She finally explained why a compost extract, the chocolate water that I make, why it works so well, right? It's called dissolved organic matter or dissolved organic carbon. And see, as fertilizer-based people, we always go NPK, NPK. We should be saying CNPK, because you can't convert N to a plant available form unless you have C as the furnace to convert it. And that's why we burn our fields, because they're so busy trying to gobble any little bit of carbon that's in the soil to use as an energy source to release the N to the plant, that they're making everything worse, worse, and worse. So her paper came out as understanding exudates as carbon, which was something that Chip Osborne started talking about years ago. But more importantly, that of the whole soil organic pool, right, SOM, only 1 to 2% is exudates. And for like a compost, like a natural rain that hits humus and washes the humic and fulvic acids down in, 1 to 2%. So when you put this shit on, it's like putting it on like a fire hose. Now that's why the plants react the way they do. It's not just the microbes. It's that just ready to use carbon source that they go.
Yes, they have because at the end of the day, right? Like if you're measuring what a plant did, you're really measuring carbon conversion.
Exactly. And you know what else is cool? I heard. Do you know Reba, Grateful Grower? I think it is. She's in
I'm from online. I don't know her in person, but I know she is in online.
Yeah, she started talking about like the ash, and you've talked about the ash. The white ash means that there's no carbon in it. It's not going to get gummy. It's not going to get a lot of tar and resin. Well, when the plant is starved of nitrogen, it can't get enough of it, it uptakes carbon, right? And it especially uptakes carbon if it's getting NPK, because it needs that carbon to also continue to break that N down into smaller and smaller components. So that's why it's nasty and harsh. So yeah, this whole revolution, or my mind just went boom when she said that about the plant tastes like carbon. And I'm like, you're right, it does.
yeah, because it's been over intensified. No, there's a fine balancing, and when we start to talk about, and I think that's really the issue, is that when we start to talk about production of agricultural crops, the metric is always more. And that's how all commoditized crops are measured. If we work in any breeding operation that involves a commoditized crop, corn, wheat, rice, sorghum, beet, it's all about yield per acre.
Yep.
And so every breeding operation is designed to enhance that one aspect. And it becomes this competition for how much can you get off the ground. And the issue is that we start, just because we have more doesn't mean it's better. So we look at more in every aspect, where there's a point where more food isn't better. The thing is, we always equate it to money as the qualifier of that idea. And it's hard to say less money is better. So when you put money in the story, more is always better.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about balanced agriculture and the ability for the crops to withstand pathogenic pressure over time and deal with just varying circumstances.
Yeah, crazy
what
weather.
you have longevity of cycle. It changes the conversation, and I think that's where the home grower, to me, in all aspects, not just in cannabis but in all crops, is really the critical component, because the home grower doesn't have to focus on more. Yeah. They focus on what's best. And it allows you to be able to see the relationship be created. But once we go into, I need 1,000 pounds, I need 1,200 pounds, I'm competing with someone who's producing 300,000 pounds, it just becomes this never-ending ride into the moors. And when we're talking about driving a plant into that situation, you have to create such a buffered environment around it, because it's so fragile, because you're pushing it to the absolute limit. And I use that phrase forever ago. I just called it plant obesity, because what you have is plants that are taking up so much material their bodies can't process it, they can't work with it, and it just becomes a signal to other creatures, either microbial or insect form.
Insect, whatever.
Eat me. Yeah, eat me, because I'm laden to the brim with nutrients, so therefore eat me. And that's not really what the plant is wanting to take place. The plant wants certain things to be eaten at certain times so that you can distribute seed. But during all its vegetative phase, being trimmed by the deer isn't ideal. And you can kind of see that with the tannin production in certain plants, where when they get overgrazed, they increase the tannins to a level that prohibit animals from eating it, and it actually becomes toxic.
Yep.
So plants form compounds in response to vegetative grazing, and when it's excessive, they metabolize and create higher and higher levels to actually kill off
the competition,
so that there's this natural balance that occurs in the ecosystem. And for us, we just don't like the balance. What we want is total control.
And look where it's gotten.
And it's funny, because we're all raised that way. And I went from being an outdoor grower in the late 70s, early 80s to doing indoor heavy for a long time. And it was because of this control. And then when I really started hanging out with these older hippies that had really, really good outdoor, I couldn't get over just the overall complexity of the impact, both nose, mouth, and high. And I started to really realize that it's the intangibles that we have to release and allow the system to work in balance.
Yeah,
and
dude.
We don't understand. We just have to accept.
Right.
And with it, we end up getting best result. But when you put the bar and then put a money sign underneath it as a ratio, that shit goes out the window. And that's really where we are with commercial cannabis, is that you have a really, really high level of standardized product, but the problem is it's standardized. It's very same.
So this is great, because it segues into two questions. One, are you still growing up on Port Royal?
I am. I'm still growing up on the port, still running it as a biological system. And I kind of, what's funny is I'll do a year, I'll take a year off. I'll do a year, I'll take a year off. And mostly because the market is so jacked, and it steals from me my joy of being a weed farmer. So, and the thing I wanted was the farm more than the weed farm. And ironically, it's the land I wanted to preserve, and it was through cultivation that I was going to do so. So I take a season off from working on the farm, and then I go, all right, I got to run this year, and I run. But then you got to deal with all the bullshit you got to deal with. You got to deal with low ball numbers. You got to deal with shady ass people. The world of commercial cannabis basically sucks.
That's what I wanted to talk about too, was where is it at up there?
Oh, it's a fucking mess. I mean, what you got operations, and I understand it's the world we live in. It's not it's not fair. Define fair. But in California, if you're talking about California production, right, you're talking about a place that can outproduce almost any place on earth agriculturally because of the climate and the technology and access to capital. So if you're talking about the global export market, you're only talking about 360, 370 tons of cannabis a year being shipped all over the earth, right? So the total export market of the entire world is 360 tons, which it's a lot, but it's not.
No, it isn't.
When you talk about one farm in California, we'll use Glass House as an example because they're the most well-known. They do 300 tons themselves, and they're only 8th on the canopy list. Wow. They're not the biggest farm anymore. There's bigger farms. And you got mixed light operations that are 7,000 lights, and you're talking intaking 20, 30,000 plants a month to fulfill their needs. So when you're producing 400,000, you need 400,000 plants a year to fill your operation, and you're cycling it through, and you're running at a level of efficiency that's just beyond comprehension. What you're able to do is get that unit price down to like $200. And so when you can create a product that is to that level, and you actually don't even have to be profitable. None of these operations are profitable. If you run the papers on them, right, they're losing money like fucking crazy. But what they do is they keep gaining market share, which makes the investor believe that it'll all turn out in the long run. So they effectively can price war small farmers to death. So you end up, you work a whole season and you get buried alive in the reality of it. And all you got to do is have one shady distributor steal your product, which has happened to every single person I know. And all of a sudden they vanish with your shit. And your recourse is what? And everyone's like, you go kill them. And I'm always laughing like, yeah, you guys are a bunch of fucking killers. Murdering someone over a debt usually results in you spend the rest of your life in prison. So explain to me how that equals out. My entire life for $100,000. So you have no recourse other than just like learn your lesson and try to move forward. So I basically go a year on, a year off, year on, year off, but I still work on the project. And some of the work that we did with like the Appalachian stuff turned out really well. So when we got into legalization, I got lucky that I didn't come up with the ideas for organic, and I didn't come up with the idea for appellations. I was just someone that was listening to people talking about it that were forerunners of the concepts. What made it different for me was I had the ability to talk to the Senate. Mm-hmm. So like that was the difference, is that I had senators in my office. And so when they came in and said, what can we do to like have an impact? I said, listen, if we could just put appellations in so that we're able to create protections for all these regions in California, so that the small farmers who own them can maintain the land ownership and they don't just get sucked up by some conglomerate, and we can create an organic program that'll dovetail in at some point, we'll have some success. So they release it and they kind of fuck it up. And I got lucky in that Dr. Dominic Corva from the Cannabis Studies Division of Humboldt State, he was the person who kind of created the program. He was able to tie me back into the state scientists. And because I had done so much research on appellations, it allowed me to sit down with the team and really talk about how do you make it really effective so that it works? Because buzzwords don't work. But if we can create a concept that's applicable so that it serves the purpose, which is to protect land, and we follow the criteria that allows any other appellation-based industry to respect our approach, yep, we'll kill it. And we just made the change. So now we have, single farm opportunity, where before it was 3 farms. And for me, I'm like, I can't do an appellation with 3 farms because the only
you're on your own fucking mountaintop.
I'm on my own fucking spot, right? I have another farm around me, except on the other side of the mountain, that has radically different impact, right? So we were able to explain all that, and they changed it. And so now we're going to get to go forward. So I'm really happy, because my goal was, it was odd, but it was to protect these pieces of land so that my family got to have them in their hands. And the fact that my farm had been a cannabis farm for, 30, 40 years prior, and I had gone through all this trouble to get it, and they made it tough on us, man. Like, people talk about business and struggles and all that shit, and I always laugh, and I'm like, I need cannabis because I'm in regular business too, and then none of that shit's as hard as this.
No.
We had 15,000 farms in Humboldt alone. We have 270 of them. They made it impossible to get a license in the mountains. They made it so financially punishing that it wiped everyone out. And the land value is going almost to like, 1/4, 1/5. So properties that were booking at $850 on the tax records for 10 years are selling for $200. So it's a free for all, just dumping land, running for your life, dumping the licenses. And what happens is you get rid of all this land that is gorgeous land, and it's going to get gentrified. It'll get bought by people with money, and you'll see that revolution occur. But the people who settled it, the regular individuals, will never make the benefit from it. And that kind of was like my dream. I was like, man, if I could just have this edge of a caldera of a volcano be in my family, my great grandkids would be able to appreciate it. And if we were able to put a cannabis farm on it so that it could monetize it and keep it as a valuable asset, in the sense that it just pays for itself.
Right.
It wasn't about making a fortune on it. The odd thing is that my farm was always the last thing in my portfolio of what I was going to do in terms of money. It was all the other things that I do that were
actually, it was
money.
your own pit, dude.
It sucked me dry, man. The beating was unreal. And then the county, you know, they're slowly kind of coming to the reality of like, okay, we went too far. But they killed everybody in the process because it's the same problem in every place. So being in California gives you an advantage in some regards, because Colorado may have been the first to go legal, but we had medical since '96. And California is not Colorado. California is a powerful economy beyond comprehension. So when you can utilize California as almost like a country, theoretically,
yep.
And you can use the data from '96 to see what happens through things, it gives you this unbelievable premonition of what's going to occur. So by being able to look at California and see the beating we took, it lets me look at any other economy, any other market in the world, and create the curves and figure out where you are on the curve.
Yep.
And it's been unbelievably accurate, right? So like that's really what's let me do what I'm doing, where we were able to put together. I was able to go work with operations in other countries, help them improve their process, improve their product lines, and create the pipeline into other countries for sale and succeed. So the companies that receive the product from the farms I consult and help, and the companies that I help create the company to receive the product are doing good. So all of that stuff has been a lot better just because I had to go through such a brutal beating here. But every time I go up the farm, I laugh because I'm looking at, I had 13 culverts I had to put in. I think I was averaging like 40 to 50,000 a culvert. Some of them cost 80 grand. And it's like, and the people say, well, that's because it's construction. I'm like, no, if I had just done a regular farm, I wouldn't have had to do any of that. If I had a hemp license and not a cannabis license, I wouldn't have had to do any of that. It's that because we're cannabis, we become this cash cow for the system.
Yep.
That every single entity takes as much as they can take, and they make you run at a pace that's almost impossible. And I had the opportunity to just get out of the mountain, and they would have given me, they call it a triple R. Basically, you rescind your license and you restore it. And they would have given me a lot more canopy some other place easily. Like, we'll make it easy for you. But I'm like, yeah, but the whole point of me being on that ridge is that the resin that comes off of my herb is unbelievably good. And I never don't sell it. And I never have anybody who touches the product, then they'll tell me this shit's amazing. And I know that it's not me. So like, I think I'm a cultivator. Like propagation is my game, but I think that I'm a competent cultivator, but I don't think I'm better than all these other farms that produce product. The farm creates an impact, which is their terroir.
Yes. So dude, like I've talked on this podcast and other ones many times about my experience with you harvesting, like going up on the mountain, like in the morning, the sun is out, we're all, bouncing around, freaking cutting plants down. And then all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, sky's black, the wind is fucking howling, rain is going horizontal. And you're just like, what happened? How is this environment that radically different in that short a period of time?
It's savage. The variation between night and day. I can't even use the farm to do R&D because we would pull up all these trace cannabinoids in the COAs, and then I would list it on the plants that we were producing for sale.
And no one else could do it.
And they weren't getting it, so they were saying you're lying. I'm like, no. And I realized that the difference in night and day on that hill can be up to 55, 60 degrees. So I can go from like 110 to 50 at night, right? Easy, 110 to 50. And I get a wind that comes in from like the northeast.
Yep.
That blows through at like 35, 40 miles an hour and basically just folds plants in half until they really stabilize. And it forced me to really start to understand, about calcium uptake. Like I really learned about how you can absolutely outrun the plant's, what we would call it, circulatory system because of the struggle until it fully acclimates and builds itself in. So I do all this extra work early in the cycle so that the plants can handle the environment. And then once they do, they become a different plant. And the quality of the resin that comes off is phenomenal. So and I knew it made really good herb, a long time ago, but having really high level hash makers say, holy shit, man, your resin is unique. It just let me realize that that's what I wanted that hill to be, was a hash hill, resin hill. And I have this little fantasy of punching in a little micro cave where I get to actually store and age it in a cave.
Oh, nice.
So our dream of selling it overseas is done as far as I'm concerned. Schedule 3 precludes any of this movement. And Schedule 3 means that you have to have, federal license to produce it. But in order to get the license to produce it, you also have to have a federal receiver, someone who's going to do steroids and form that we use, which is in combustible. So tell me how many of them went home and smoked them. You don't.
No.
And so the issue is that we really don't have a good situation. And then people are screaming about, Schedule 3 is going to give us this 280E break. And I'm like, yeah, but over a year ago, there was another bill put through the Senate that clearly states they want to make anything involving marijuana forever be a 280E schedule on taxation. And so if you take a look at the hemp industry and how they allowed it to flourish for 5 years, people say it was a mistake. And I'm like, let me get this straight. You got a country that's blowing $1 trillion a year on whatever the fuck they're blowing it on. You're going to tell me they don't have 100 Elon Musks in a room analyzing every single decision? Like there's no random shit at a country at this scale. And I says, and you're going to tell me that if you brought in 3 fractal distillers from petroleum who invented fractal distillation, that they wouldn't be able to tell you, hey, do you know that if you grew enough of this shit, you'd be able to break this down and get all these cannabinoids? So to me, what occurred was they built an industry that was demonized because of the illegality. Hemp is legal. It allowed all these people who otherwise were not legal to be legal. It allowed all these normal farmers to embrace the crop and say, look, $100, is way better than, $20 for our typical products. So you normalize the production, you normalize the consumption, you develop all the marketing, all the demand, you develop to a $30 billion level. And then once you got all that shit together, alcohol and tobacco comes in and takes it. And alcohol comes in and says, hey, nobody's drinking, but we have the ability to create beverages in cannabis because we have the tools and we have the lobbying. And then the Schedule 3 is pharma.
Have you tried the Willies stuff or the cactus stuff? Have you had any of those that have come out lately?
No, I haven't had any of the newer drinks. And I'm not really a beverage fan too much, and mostly because they taste like shit.
Dude, so this Willie's stuff?
Some of them taste better, but like for me, who's tasted these products for year upon year upon year upon year upon year, I'm like, the day Coca-Cola gets a hold of this shit, they're gonna kill you. Because like some of the flavors are like, they're so bougie, but I'm like, who drinks this shit? But they without question have gotten so much better. But the problem is it won't be any of us that's selling it. It won't be really any of us that are in the Schedule 3 bracket. And the reality of it is because it's Schedule 3, it allows, inter-country movement of products. And if you're really just mining molecules, why would you mine them from expensive American shit when you could mine them from other countries and bring it over? So we don't grow opium in America. We grow it in Afghanistan, and we protect it, and we then mine it, and then we synthesize it into our opiate industry, right? So Afghanistan provides fundamentally all the fucking opium we use to make our opiate-based medicines. And I don't see anybody bitching about that, right? So I'm laughing. I'm like, careful. You will find cheaper recourses, because if it's like with Thailand, right? So Thailand is a good example, because Thailand, it adopts cannabis production, and because it's primarily mixed light indoor, we're able to do a technological transfer. So just like silicone chips that we do in Central Valley of California, we can make them in Bangladesh to the same exact degree, as long as we follow that ISO standard. So when we talk about mixed light and indoor, it's a technology that allows it to happen. And then when we put in lower cost of labor, it's a problem. So Thai cannabis, which is being able to be produced using modern technology, is a good quality product. But when you can get the product to the sale at $500 less, because you're not having to pay as much for the labor, it's disrupting the international markets. All these countries are like, what the fuck? And then Thai just shut down 7,800 of their stores. So now you're going to see 7,800 stores worth of product be pushed back into the export model. So
all right, whoa. What the fuck happened there? Because that was like this big gold rush, and then all of a sudden
it was a free for all. But you got to remember that, like, I got Thai partners that I got brought into a conversation with some wealthy Thai. And when I'm talking wealthy Thai, I'm talking like, 20 billion wealthy Thai, like different level, right? So I get turned on to a group and a specific individual who's, I want to say is value in the Forbes is like around 18 billion.
Okay.
Right? Like wealthy beyond comprehension. I'm telling you, $18 billion dudes are different dudes. And I got brought in. I got introduced to him through a group. He flies in. He meets me. We hang out. Sweetheart of a guy, right? This really lovely human being. And we're talking about cannabis and stuff. And we were having a conversation. And a lot of it was, for him, it was, man, he goes, it's funny, Kev. He goes, it was so taboo for so long in our Asian culture that I'm not sure what to do. And I said, there's nothing more than I would love to work with you, because the money would be unbelievable. But if you're asking me as a consultant, like what to do, I would say why? Because at the end of the day, you don't need the money. And the culture of Asia is not canna friendly, not drug friendly. And I said, so the problem is that it's fickle. And if we have any sway in tolerance or anything that causes some problem, the government's response will go back to a more draconian approach, because it doesn't fit culturally with who they are. And so we kind of argued it out, me and a group, and argue like, opposing viewpoints, but support with evidence, right?
Yeah.
And they said, that's a pretty honest assessment. And because you're the one who's going to be losing out on the money, it is honest, right? And I said, no, totally. I said, because you're being brought to me to make good decisions. And I said, and as much as I would love to work with you, I don't think it's worth the risk, because they're culturally not about it. And then it turns into a free-for-all and being shipped over there illegally. I mean, the back door on metric is insane, right? So all these people are backdooring shit and moving it internationally, and the pound prices were hot and the money was there. But the thing is that the Thai government, and they were just like, wait a second, we're of the very essence that makes us who we made that we're good. That shit went the other direction. When those 8,000 commercially, because if one, we got a problem. And I'm like, and it just becomes this brutal, bloody war. And so, and it's always the argument, well, it's not that good and people care. And I'm like, well, I don't see people driving a lot of Ferraris. I see them driving a lot of used Toyotas. So I'm sure they would love to be in a Ferrari, but they can't afford it. And I've said this 100 times, and it infuriates people because they don't like the simplicity of it. But it's that when you own a cash register, you get to see this reality of transaction that just transcends all other realities. And the reality is that there's two people that come into a transaction. I don't give a fuck what brought you in the room. One person buys what they want. The other buys what they can afford.
Yep.
And what we believe is that everyone buys what they want, and that there's this high value market. And I'm like, you realize that's like one person out of 100. So if 1,000 people come in the store, you got 10 of them that drop the money that they just want, especially since we've wiped out the disposable income in the country, in the United States specifically, right? So value products are where it's king, and you can't compete with value products when you're in the development of a new industry. So there's either micro or macro. Anybody in the middle gets creamed because they're not able to work on specialty products because it doesn't fit their deck, and they're not big enough to benefit from economy of scale. So what you got is you got this system that's sorting itself out. But the problem is it's not a true market. It's not, enter and exit at will. It's not best interest. It's a fixed market. It's a controlled market. And you have all this influence around it that was without question agenda, right? So like if alcohol can petition McConnell, who then turns his back on the very bill that he wrote, it doesn't work. It was kind of like I had a bunch of major seed companies hit me up to say, hey, we all want to get together and go fight, for the seed rights, right? Because they're going to cut seed sales out of the farm bill. And I said, are any of you looking at the voting? And I'm like, you're not, because you usually get maybe a senator to flip. But in order for us to flip the farm bill and change anything, we'd have to get 38 senators to flip. So 38% is never been done. There's no precedent in political history where 38 senators said, I am going to change my mind and reverse the decision I just made. They don't. So you can get one or two, you can get, even on both sides of the aisle, you can swing a Democrat, you can swing a Republican. You ain't swinging 38 of anybody. So by the time I was done talking to these guys, I was like, why spend any money trying to convince 38 senators that they made a mistake and that they need to allow you to maintain your seed business because home growing is important to you? It just doesn't, it's not an argument that works. And in the United States, it's pretty fucking clear. Like we romanticize our voice as an individual, but the more you really look at I've been involved in this, me, man, I've been involved in this for a while.
Dude, that's why I love having conversations with you, because
I do my homework. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I do my fucking homework. I really, really do. I look and look and look and look and look. And then I try to say, okay, if I take all this supporting evidence and I try to be reasonable with it, and I always say, like, okay, if I had to go put my head on a block and risk getting it fucking lopped off, would I bet that way? And I'm done betting that way on any of it, because what I see is that every step of the way, we're a cash cow, and that in our country, unfortunately, alcohol, which is failing because people don't want to drink anymore, and it's globally, you're seeing a change in fermentation, right? People desire less fermented beverages that are alcoholic driven. And the irony is everyone's like, yeah, but everybody's smoking weed. And I'm like, no, the younger kids are at a radically lower level of consumption than any generation prior. So we have less new consumption coming in. We have more consumption, and it's rising, but it's not rising from younger people. It's rising from older people who are making the conversion. Well, they're a dying community. Right. So like me trying to culture, and it's not that I'm against old people, I'm old too, but I'm like, culturing me as a long-term client isn't the best move. It's better to culture. And I look at this and I'm just like, I don't think we're clear here. We're using such optimism, and we're using this argument that the good of the people matter. And if you're really clear about what's happening in the government around us, it makes it insane. It's just like they just made, glyphosate some kind of fucking national treasure they had to protect. And you're looking at this shit and you're like, how can any of this be normalized if you don't monetize it, right? So it just lets us take a look at this and say, whoa, for me, the fantasy is still the same fantasy, that what we do is we create a situation, which is what you're doing, in my opinion. You're creating a database, a knowledge base, a support base that allows people who want to be able to grow their own cannabis in a holistic method. They have a resource to go to and say, whoa, I can learn a lot, man. I can understand soil horizons. I can understand how we do compost extracts. I can understand how if I do all these things, I'll get what I want. And what we'll have is hopefully like this robust community of home growers who produce their own products and individually create that little tiny bit of good in the world, and collectively it becomes huge, so that as the pendulum swings, we start to swing the right direction. But right now we're basically in financial prostitution, and cannabis is the hoe that they all want us put out on the street. And I look at it and I'm like, wow, it's just amazing to see what the drug war did to us.
Dude.
It's an addiction. They can't break the drug war cycle because they're addicted to the money. It's the same shit going on like right now with the war in Mexico, right? We're constantly screaming, these Mexicans are smuggling dope and doing all this shit. We're junkies, right? The U.S. is a junkie population that consumes 85% of the world's drugs. So if we didn't want the damn drugs, they wouldn't be moving into the country. What is forcing us to want to consume so much cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, right?
Dude, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, so we yell at everyone else, but at the same time, if we didn't have the drugs coming in, we would have to defund the DEA, and that won't happen.
Dude,
in California, we don't have an ability to have every county have its own ability to, it doesn't follow a statewide mandate on legalization. What it does, it goes county by county. And if you really go into the data, it's the counties that are minority driven that have the most restrictions, and the counties that have like a higher white demographic have the ability. And what it does, it allows you to create drug war 2.0 until the revenues from taxes offset that at some point, because everyone is addicted to the money. You can't create a $1 trillion drug budget and then remove it, because where do all those people go? Like, the unions aren't going to let them not have jobs.
Right.
We're stuck in that shit. That is cannabis.
Kev, did you see the articles about, I forget whether it was Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket? They went out there to do water studies on the wastewater coming out of people's houses, their mansions. And what they noticed was the level of cocaine present in the sewer water was through the roof. So then they started.
That's Seattle Bay.
Yeah.
You can't catch a salmon in Seattle that doesn't have trace elements, and on the East Coast, it's in the shrimp.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's in the shellfish, right? So,
dude, it's crazy, and they had the highest potency.
Yes, it's unbelievable, because so many people are doing coke and pissing out, and I don't fault you for doing drugs. Everybody, to me, has the right and the ability to do it themselves as they choose, as long as they don't hurt other people in the process, right? So if you want to drink. If you're getting drunk and you're beating your wife, there's a problem.
Yeah, great.
Right? So, like, I always try to give people space, because who am I to tell you what to do? But when you have enough piss laden with cocaine to contaminate all the fish out in the ocean in the bay, it's beyond comprehension. And see, we then blame the supplier, but the reality of it is without that supply, we wouldn't have the drug war. If we didn't have the system that we've put in place, which is circuitous, it'd be different, and that's cannabis. And what it does is it's kind of like with farms in general, it makes it very difficult for farms that are running, like we would call them organic systems, carbon-based, non-petrochemical driven systems. They have extremely hard time in competition, because over the course of their life, they get more yield, because anytime there's problems, the plants are more resilient. But as we measure in short-term data sets, year to year, we get more and more and more the more we pound them with food. And they subsidize and utilize methodologies and tools and formulations that aren't good for us. But if the farmer wants to remain in business, they have to adopt it. Yeah. And it's the same. So like it's such an oddity, because with as much knowledge as we have in terms of healthy agricultural practices, we don't adopt them because you can't afford to.
Right. The machine has got us by the balls.
Yeah,
right?
And it's eating us alive. And for me, the only way out of this shit is really like through home growers, which and people never understood it. They were like, why do you give up so much information for so long about all the shit you do? And I'm like, because I want someone to benefit.
Right.
So that when I'm gone, somebody benefited. And yeah, I know people take the information, do what they want with it, but if somebody could benefit from it in a positive way, and it allowed them to be able to have a better quality of life.
You get it, Kevin.
That's a beautiful thing to be involved in.
Yeah, that's why I do what I do. It's
healthy, man. And you haven't changed. I've known you for a long time. You got the same motivation when I met you, same motivation now, and I'm the same dude every goddamn day too. It's that we are old enough to understand, like, whoa, we already went down a couple of wrong roads. I don't need to continue going down them. But at the same time, I'm not going to attack people that go the wrong route, because it's a process. And I learned that from, like, it was funny, but from Nick Mahood at one of the Regen conferences. We were talking about regenerative agriculture, and I said, Nick, it's funny. I'm on the tour, but I'm not competent in regenerative agriculture. I'm just really a student. Like, I'm really just learning. And I said, and I'm trying. And he looked at me and he said, Kev, he goes, that's the admission that must be made. Yeah. He said, you're saying that you don't know and that you're trying to learn and you're asking questions and you're trying to follow practices. He said, that really is the road to discovery on this. He said, because at the end of the day, none of us have our hands on this fully, because it's so complex that all we can do is strive to be better. And he goes, and as long as you can remember that, and remember that it's not a race, that it might take you 50 years to get your farm where you want it to be, but it's okay because you're working towards the goal. He goes, that is the point. Yeah. And it was profound, because it just made me feel so much better about step-by-step process and not worry so much about a race, so that I too can proclaim my greatness. It was about the process, is really the humility
process, right?
Yeah. And it's the humility to accept that you are only you, and that you can only move as fast as you do. And as long as you strive towards that and you're honest about it, especially like with us, because we have platforms. So in the platform, there's some things that when I speak, I'm like, look, we can argue all goddamn day, but I did my research and I did the work. And what I'm telling you is that shit's pretty accurate. And then there's other things where I'm fully in admission of, like, I have no clue. This is only an opinion. Yeah. And it allows people to be able to realize that you're admitting that you don't know.
Right. There's a lot. Hey, we're just travelers, man. We're
yeah. And I know the deeper I dive, the farther from the bottom I get. Right?
Remember,
so I was like, no, the dumber I get,
dude.
I laugh. Pakistan made this shit crystal clear.
Remember when I introduced you to Chip Osborne, and this was after his talk, and your head was still spinning about, like, all the relationships of the chemistry. And he's like, hey, nice to meet you, bye, and then he went off on his way, and you're like, dude, that guy fucking went deep.
He did. No, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, is that, like, I got invited to be part of the tour, and I told you guys, I said, listen, I'm not really qualified to be on the tour because this isn't my speciality, and you and Josh were really supportive about saying, no, Kev, we just want you to do what you do. And that's part of it, right? And so I said, all right, I can join, because this way I'm not really, what do you call it, imposter syndrome. So I'm not trying to pretend that I'm a wizard in this thing. I'm standing next to Zelig, I'm standing next to you, I'm next to Josh, I'm next to Nick, I'm next to Chip, and I'm like, I'm not any of you guys.
But you did,
I'm good at what I do.
You had something that was really important, because you had this perspective that none of the other cannabis growers that we met had. And it was through experience. It was through hard work, doing the impossible, dude. You had the largest cannabis nursery in the country at one point in time. When it was
when it was all risk.
Dude, come on, man.
Be insane.
You fucking kidding me? You had the mayor up there. You had people, like, really listening to what you were saying, and because you were real, right? So, in that piece of the puzzle was so important for these naive, enthusiastic, young kids that want to grow regenerative and organic cannabis. They needed a reality slap. Like, dude, this is not all fun and fucking games. And you brought that to the table, man. Think about marketing and branding. most of those people never even heard of marketing and branding and diversity. And so, yeah, no, that was, you were one hell of a compliment to, like spice, like fucking pepper and salt on those eggs. I mean, it was a good time, dude. I miss those days.
Me too. I just saw, Elaine had passed, and
yeah,
I was trying to explain to somebody. I said, man, I said, I'll never forget, her explanation when she got all excited. She goes, the plants provide the cakes and the cookies. She said, you need to have all the cover crops to make sure that all the sugar is goodies, and it was so. It was something that only an older woman could say and make it resonate.
Yeah, excited. Like she was so.
Yeah, no, and Elaine was incredible. And
I'm so fortunate that we got a chance to all share together on that journey.
Yeah, share time, man. I mean, having her, cross the street at the friggin' One Log, chopping it up with Frenchie and you. I mean, like there were so many wonderful experiences that happened, sidebar of the event. And
she came over to my shop because I had learned about anaerobic uptake from Alan Atkinson.
I know, we were chopping it up with Alan.
Fermentation, and then I used that concept to see if we could get plants to stabilize that were under stress from hop Leighton.
Yep.
And so Elaine came to me to say, we were able to like bang it out. And it was fascinating because I was having a conversation with somebody and I was saying, I'm not qualified to have the conversation with you, but I have the results that show that this works. And what it did was it allowed her to understand that really what separated us was ppm. How many parts per million of O2 present dictates aerobic or non-aerobic. Mm-hmm. And anything on that spectrum is in this little micro gray area. And it let her see a system that was effectively that worked. And it let me understand that there was many ways to get to the result. And because I wasn't smart enough to argue with her and I wasn't trying to, I just said, look, I took information from someone who had a really good idea. And then I said, let me use it to try to solve a problem. And because I had so many scientists around me that could do all the analytical testing of my work, it let me know that I was going the right route. But to have Elaine Ingham come to your shop, have a discussion with you about the merits and dismerit of aerobic or non-aerobic, it blew my mind that I had her in my shop. And I couldn't believe that she was there to ask me a question. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, whoa. And it let me see really what leadership is in our field, because her approach was never aggressive
or condescending
ever. And it was always about this miracle and mystery and complexity that we all have to work with. And it was guys like Nick that said, Kev, just remember, man, he goes, this shit ain't a competition. He said, as long as you stay on track and you keep studying and you work, he goes, what you'll have is you'll have an ability to influence people because you have such a large platform. And I said, all right, then I'll use my platform in that regard. And I'll just say, look, you're getting to watch me stumble and fail and learn. And that's okay, because that really is real life.
And it's inspiring, Kevin. It's inspiring for people to see when you can say, shit, that didn't work. I got to go back to the drawing board. But
yes, it allows them to feel the same thing, because what happens is, it's kind of like, what I learned from all the years of doing cannabis business was, like, when I was younger, I thought that all these, billion-dollar enterprises were created with such genius, right? And when I got involved in all these monstrous operations and I'm looking around, I'm like, holy fuck, what you guys do is you just throw wads of money at the wall and whatever sticks you keep. I said, there's no fucking genius. The genius is in raising the money.
Right.
It wasn't the genius of the idea. It was that you could throw enough money at it long enough till something popped.
Yeah, the pivot of the pitch. Remember, you did a podcast on the pivot of the pitch.
The pivot of the pitch, man. And it without question made life better, because it made me realize that we can all be powerful in our own regard. Yeah. And that if we're trying to do things that are pretty wholesome and reasonable, we'll get some people that are inspired by it, and they'll go on and do things. And I would say that I said, my whole goal all these years was that I wanted to be able to look at the future of cannabis and as an older person and just realize that I had a minor part in that process, that I had been somebody who was supportive of people who were going to do and be better than I ever could. Amen. Because we're trapped in our own world. We only have so much information, so many limitations. And for all of us that were from we would call the drug war era,
dark ages,
I have some very distinct memories and opinions of the people who executed that control. So it makes it hard for me to see it in a neutral view. And it makes it hard for me to see those people in a neutral view. And that's what I tell the people. I said that hopefully with normality, you don't have to have my distaste to slow down your palatability of new things.
It's salt.
Yeah, too much salt in the mouth and it burns.
Oh man. So yeah, so I guess, the one last question might be that'll lead to a couple other ones, but here in the United States, where is all that weight going? I mean, it has to be going over the border somewhere, right?
It's well, not really. Like it was moving into other countries, but remember that the overall totality is only 360 tons, right? So what you got is, and remember, now this is my opinion, you got enough people screaming at it to say that it's not just mine, but what they do is they create this system that is a tracking system to make sure there's no diversion. So say you're a giant producer, any producer, but a giant producer is a good one because they say they produced 100 tons, but only 10 tons got sold because 90 tons got destroyed due to pathogenic issues. So what you have is this complete lack of true tracking, and there's no. It's kind of like with that Doge ship that was going on. They were putting AI on stuff to say, hey, let me look at the pattern. And so you look at these farms and you're like, let me get this straight. You've been in business for 10 years. You're expanding exponentially every year, but you're losing 90% of your money every year. And that's fucking physically impossible. So what you have is you have a situation where you got about 32, 35% of the total sales through a storefront. 60, 66, 65% on the illicit. And I don't fault the illicit at all. Like it's not a war between these two factions. It's purely you're allowing companies to have an ability to dump product into the illicit system. And when it was hemp, you were allowing them to dump product into a hemp license and then move it in via US mail. And what it did was because there's no way you could be that big and lose that much money and still gain that much investment. So somehow monies are moving, and we don't have to be financial advisors to understand that. And what you have is this system that really only benefits shareholders because it protects the shareholder from losing value in the investment. And when you look at who's invested in these giant companies, it's insane. And so, I mean, Christ, you got Epstein's crew involved in cannabis, right? So groups that he's involved in own operations that control fucking operations, right? So
they control countries, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. So, and cannabis is just this little tiny dot in the big picture. What really gave me the perspective of how important cannabis was when I had a conversation with the head scientist from Syngenta, and me and him were hanging out having lunch, right? And I'm like, how come you're not in cannabis? And he goes, why? He goes, we're global food. He goes, we don't give a shit about weed. He goes, we control the food supply. He goes, us and Monsanto control the food supply of the earth. He said, that's money. And he said, but I'll tell you one thing, Kev. He goes, the day we get into cannabis, you will know we're here. He goes, because we're going to bring a force that you have never seen before. He goes, we can blow, at the time it was over 1 million a day. That'd be about 2 million now. So they can dump approximately almost 800 million a year just in pure R&D, right? They can burn 800 million a year in the budget to just play. And so he was clear, and he goes, there's no reason. He goes, and the also thing is, he goes, without federal legalization, he goes, they could nationalize our investments. He said, so our game is century game. We play a game that goes on long after I'm here. He goes, you guys are all trying to like exist and survive in the current. He said, that's not the game that's at the international level. And I just took that conversation and I just started to overlay it over the top of all the other things that I'm involved in cannabis. And I started to understand the play that is in play is really 20, 30, 40 year play.
Yeah.
And it's with alcohol is a really good example, because we always scream alcohol gets to sell online. Well, that took 80 years of petitioning for that to happen, not online, but just to be able to do direct sales. So everything takes forever when it's not beneficial to those that are at the top of the chain. And they can wait it out. They have a 100-year plan. They don't care. It's their grandkids that'll benefit, not them. They don't need to benefit. They're already rich.
Right.
So that's the issue that we have, is that when you create these poor, and people say, no, it's a godsend. And I'm like, no, it's not. I said, let me get this straight. I have to risk doing illegal drug sales to keep my legal license alive.
I know, what the fuck.
I said, so that's why I fluctuate on and off, because I'm like, look, I'd rather just do the illegal sale. I'm like, I'm somebody that doesn't give a shit about that. It's just that I wanted to try to build a legal farm so that for once in my friggin' life, I could do something normal, right? And I'm laughing because I'm getting my head cut off in every goddamn direction for trying to be normal and be, be good. And I'm like, I look at myself and I'm like, am I the dumbest fucking dude in the room or what?
You are too fucking funny, dude.
But it's real, and so that's what's taking place is you're washing all this herb into the system, and every state is being hammered. And now that they cut the hemp back, wait till you see the fallout in California this year, right? They keep talking about like, each time it's an extinction event. Man, we got that Yucatan asteroid falling fucking weekly now. It is going to drop in because there's no way to wash all this herb into the system, because there's no longer the ability to hide it under hemp. And yes, you can sell herb online and you can ship it and sell it, but you can't do it with the credit card and you can't do it with the website. So all of a sudden, how do you get this level? And I was talking to the hemp guys, a year ago. We were doing a project and we were bringing in some investment for a job. And the hemp guys were like, we don't want to get into weed. And I said, man, I tell you the truth. I said, weed is probably safer than hemp right now. And they were laughing and they said, you're missing the point. And I'm like, no, I don't think you're catching it. I said, I'm looking at the writing on the fucking wall. They're talking about kids buying gummies. And the minute you see any news about kids doing anything, it's the harbinger for change. And a week later, he calls me. He goes, Kev, I got the FBI in all my stores and shit. And I was like, whoa. The game ended there. And so everyone says, we'll go back to doing what we do. And I look at these people and I'm like, you were never involved in illegal business. You were involved in gray area. Yeah. So you don't really catch what it's like to catch a case. Yep. Have you ever been dragged out of your business in handcuffs and stuffed in the fucking cell? Nope. I said, they don't give a shit. I said, you're going to cry like a little kid, man. You never, ever got in trouble for real. So you don't quite catch what it's like to be in the criminal justice system. Yeah, you're not gonna and I said, all they got to do is behead a couple of people and it will dissuade many. And I think that you're going to see a change this year in California that's going to be fucking frightening, because there's nowhere to offload the dope. If you take a look go online and just look up top 10 producers in California, look at the fucking quantity of canopy these guys are producing, right? And then they say, yes, and we have 10 dispensaries and we white label. And I'm like, you would have to have 10,000 fucking dispensaries and you have to white label the earth in order for you to move that much weed. Right. So like when we start to talk about it, and the idea is that people are smoking more. And I'm like, listen, you can drop a product to free and you're still not going to smoke more once you reach satiety. So if someone's just giving me pounds, does that mean I just lay in my floor all day and smoke? That's like the idea of Snoop Dogg smoking 50 blunts a day. Right. I figured it out on paper. that he would theoretically sleep zero and he'd have to have a joint in his mouth the whole day in order to have that many blunts burning because of the time it takes to burn the blunt, right? And someone's like, no, it's real. He burns 100. I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood shit. Regular people smoke and they're not on IG. They don't give a fuck. They just want to be able to have some herb in their life. And the price is what controls so much of the consumption. But you drop the price, there's a point where they consume no more.
Yeah.
And you're going to see this year is going to be bloody because all of these operations geared up huge over the last couple of years, utilizing the hemp loophole as an offload methodology. And the global market, even though it's increasing, it's really not increasing to the degree that you think, because the biggest population centers that we'd like to tap into, which would be Asia, and it would say like China, India, those countries where you have 1 billion people, they're not fucking buying anybody's export weed.
No, they got plenty of their own.
They got plenty of their own, right? And so where are you selling all this herb, right? Australia's being flooded. Germany's being flooded. The UK being flooded. France, they're moving bags of dope, but they're not moving shiploads of weed. And people just don't realize that, like, when you get this many countries online, and the reason why you have export is because it costs too much to start a project in terms of initial capital outlay. So it's easier to just create distribution storefronts movement and then import the product. Yep. But once we get to a point where we have enough funding and can raise funds, the countries then start to develop their own internal support systems. So at some point, you quit importing so much product, and the countries that are relying on export, which is like Canada, where the export model is the whole fucking country because their internal markets are less lucrative, what they've done is they fundamentally abandoned the internal markets and they've lost their brand value in the country. So I come in, and what I do is I try to help people understand, listen, watch the flow of products and money and look at the numbers and look at the flow, and you can see that it is a declining trend. So at some point you're going to hit a break even, and then it won't make any sense to export. When you come back into your home country, you'll have no brand because you never developed it. And really, every country has to have its own internal branding, its own internal culture. And the best thing that happens for the world in cannabis really is that we're not involved, because we would fucking disrupt the earth. But you know me, man, my dream was to sell cannabis in Europe, hash in Europe from my farm, so people in other countries could experience what Humboldt County's impact on outdoor does. And I had to basically just turn that dream off and just say, look, we'll have our own internal system in California that'll be separate from the federal system, but it won't allow us to enter the federal system, which is really insurance-driven sales, or do any type of export. And even if we create compacts that say we can go from like California to Arizona, oh, fuck, no, you can't, because that's a federal highway you got to travel on, and that's federal airspace. Yep. So unless you can miraculously, molecularly shift this shit in some kind of teleportation device, you're automatically risking federal offense to do so. And people say they're going to do it. And I laugh, and I'm like, okay, well, you go be the test case, because a federal ass kicking is not a state ass kicking.
No.
And look at Virginia, right? Virginia put their rules in. And then they tighten it up, and then like if they catch you with 5 pounds, 1 gram, you're looking at 5 to 30 years in prison. Right now, think about it. Like that's like saying, like you can only have X amount of alcohol that's you made, and if you have a single beer more, you're doing 5 years in prison up to 30 years. You're like, there's no precedent for the draconian punishment that's being put into play. And what I see is that we're regressing in a lot of our situations as well. So, anybody that's getting into herb and doing the thing, it's like every market I assess, whatever the numbers are that you look at, I say, listen, just put a curve that shit based off of every other market's decline, figure out how many months it's going to take you to get online. And at that part of the curve, it'll tell you what your real price point will be. And if you can't be profitable at that, don't even fucking waste a second on the fantasy.
Yep.
It's and I get hit up constantly for this kind of stuff. And I feel bad because I'm telling people, like, I know you want to do a living soil system. I know you want to do all this shit. Have you ever fucking done a large scale living soil system? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then how the fuck are you going to light up a business and do trial and error and get paid? Yeah. I said, you don't want to get a beating. Just really, really relook at the dream and realize that the dreams become nightmares when you got to pay the bill.
Yep. Hey, so you have 5 questions. We went over by 15 minutes. I love
that, man. Shoot the questions.
Yeah.
I'll try to get them out as fast as I can.
All right, Kevin, how's the Packy project coming along? Appreciate you, sir.
Packy Exchange project's been fantastic. I was able to, I received, all the seed stock from the stuff. And what I did was, other entities sold it and did commercial stuff. What I did is I just shared it with everybody I knew so that the goodwill of Pakistan transcended me and made it into people's hands. And you're getting to see a proliferation of this material all over the place. And it's bringing new profiles and better resistance and just, it's also bringing awareness that we're a global community and that we have to behave that way, that all of us together make a difference. And there is no competition in terms of us as human beings.
Cool. Now somebody's asking about seeds, the CDSR9, the 4, the Ghost OG, and they're asking if you had any seeds left.
I don't, but who did a lot of work with that was Phil, which is Boneyard Tony. So Tony got that stock from me years ago, and he did a great job. And I want to say Eclectic Elegance too, which is Riley. I gave him a lot of that CDSR work as well that I had done, and he took it out into probably F4, F5. But I know that Tony did a great job working with it. And see, for me, what I do is I work a project for a while. I get it to a certain point, and I release it into the world. And then I go work another project. Like, my mind just needs to be fed. So once I get to a point with something where I think it's good, I release it, and then I let people do what they choose with it, because what it does is it lets them go and benefit. And I just get to be a little part of the picture, which is awesome. So I would say look up Boneyard Tony and Eclectic Elegance, and both of those guys worked those lines pretty heavy and did a great job.
Cool. So when did you start using KNF and why?
It's funny, but like, I'm really not a big KNF guy, but the first time I did any type of fermentation work, and I would say KNF meaning like you follow all the specificities of it, where you're utilizing, hey, there he is right there. What's up, Toad? Hit him up, man. He's got the right work. What you got is the first time I got to really mess around, it was with this group called Nomad's Landing, and they were regenerative farmers. And what we did is we did fermentations from the star thistle on my property, and we just took a couple pounds, bags of sugar, and dumped it in the water, and then put all the star thistle in the bags and sealed it all up and let that shit cook and break down. And then we drained it off, and we used it as a ferment to add to try to drive a greater profile response. And so that was like my very first introduction to like plant ferments. And a lot of it is I don't follow any specific method more so than I just try to understand natural farming, which is like fundamentally like Chris Trump. We got to spend time with Chris, where you're trying to utilize good common farming practices. And even with Korean natural farming, the son said, listen, we don't have sugar to use. That's not natural. So we use potatoes. So there was even, change between father and son, but it wasn't a conflict. It was just really about a reality. And I think that that's what you have to take as a farmer, that you don't have to follow anything verbatim. You have to follow the principle. It's the concept that you need more than the actual ingredients. It's how do you use the tools you have. And so that was my first time I touched it. And that's what really kind of got me understanding that we can break things down and use them in an assimilable form.
Cool. Now, Silly Lily wants, what does Kevin think about Leighton's horizontal soil system?
I think it's pretty fascinating because Leighton reminds me more of a carpenter in the way he builds soil, in that it's really a practical approach, and it's one of observation and utilization. And everything that he's done has been extremely simplified methodology that makes it easier for the individual to have success. And so I think that it's people like Leighton that make these type of concepts applicable, because it's the same thing as I don't have to understand the science as much as I have to understand the application. And that way, what I'm able to do is apply it. And then through the application, the science is revealed. And now I actually have a context that I can study the science and understand it. And so Leighton's approach is I build it, and then we talk to the architect later, because he's seen the product. And so I think that, Leighton's always done some amazing shit. So I think that the system is solid. And I get people hit me up all the time. What do you think about the horizon system? And I said, it's brilliant, because at the end of the day, all soils form in these horizons. They form in these layers, and how they stratify, and how the plant works within them, and how you bring material up and down through it, so that what you have is an efficient uptake.
And just to let everybody know, for the last 5 weeks, we've been discussing Leighton's system. So there's a lot of videos specifically on that and how to build one.
Mm-hmm.
So
thanks. I feel like I'm something in the wall over here.
No, it's great, brother. It's great, man. You've been doing a really wonderful job making complicated things easier for people to do, so that there's a place to begin, and then in it you can dive. Because the bottom line is, you're never going to get to the bottom of any of this shit, because there's nothing as complicated as a fucking living system. It's the acceptance of the complexity that makes it workable.
Dude, when you add in biogenesis and horizontal gene transfer, forget it, Kev. They're multiplying and friggin' evolving so fast in 1 second that we're never going to keep up.
No, and we're not supposed to. We're just supposed to be able to be good stewards of the land we touch, so that we can allow these natural systems to occur, and then hopefully add in little things to balance out what was taken out. And what was the next question?
Farmer Cheryl, what allowed are home growers being successful, or are there challenges?
Well, if you're allowed to cultivate, I think that first you just have to be able to be honest and say, what is your ability to actually cultivate? And so it's sometimes it's better to run 2 bottles in a closet and get product that you can touch, and then slowly work towards defining really where you want to be with a more complicated system. So I never tell anybody how they should home grow, because we all have different skill levels and different budgets and different desires. But I think that it's this process of evolution. And I think that you have to, for me, I've touched a lot of shit, a lot of stuff. And it's touching so many things that help me understand why I like to do what I do and why I do what I like to do. But if I hadn't experienced so many different things, I wouldn't have an opinion. So I think that as a home cultivator, if you're in an area that allows it, the best thing you can do is to form a group, so that what you have is a bunch of you that are growing, and it allows all of you combined to use your skills and brains to be able to troubleshoot and understand, so that somebody's going to figure something out the others didn't, and then you can take that information. So the issue with illegal cultivation is we weren't able to communicate with anyone, and most of the information we took was misinterpreted. So when you take a data set, you extrapolate data from one set and apply it to another. Most of the time, it's not accurately extrapolated. It's not applied correctly, because it's not being adjusted to fit the specificity. So with normalized cannabis, we have an ability to communicate And if in that community you can get people together, it starts to say, okay, listen, we all want to figure out how to run a biologically driven system. What do we need to do? And what's the basic things that are required? And how do we do this as efficiently as possible so that what we have is a sustainable system? Because once people fail and it costs money, then they get frustrated and they stop, like all hobbies. But all hobbies require support systems. And the support system in our case is human beings that help us understand where we went wrong, where we went right. And you're able to share and move that. And so find some people who are similar minded and don't be afraid to fail. And if a couple of you are working in conjunction, it makes it easy. Like for me specifically, I did all the R&D for my group forever, right? So like every mistake we made, I made it at my spot. And what it did was it allowed us to be able to figure out what to do right or wrong, but we never did it at any of the business spots or anybody else's spot. So all we ever saw outside of our own failure was total success, because I was the guinea pig taking the beating on the lesson. And it was extremely effective, and nobody ever understood it. But me and my guys did. They realized that somebody's got to fail in order for others to succeed, so that we went too far. We're going the wrong way. We're not going enough. And so if you have a team of people like that and you make a failure, it's okay, because the other people in the group can help offset your loss by giving you some smoke. But if you're only you and you're dependent on it, you got to take the simplest system possible so you have the product, and never let anybody talk shit to you about what you got to do to make that happen. Just realize that you want, no adulterants on the product, so that you're not taking in contaminated product. But if you have to use the simplest shit possible, then that's where you begin, and you use that as your step one, and you work towards a goal that you have, and you find people to bounce ideas, and you try to attend seminars like that are being put on here, where you got people that are actively involved in a craft saying, hey, it's okay to not to be so perfect at first. You just work towards the goal. Never lose faith.
So a think tank, grow tank idea, basically.
Yeah, you gotta get enough people together, and then that way, if anybody really fucking blows it and kills all their shit, there's enough to say, hey, look, here's a quarter pound. You got some smoke till the next run. Let's figure out what you did wrong. And we all have a value. So just because someone made a mistake doesn't mean they're not valuable still. It just means that you got to determine who's good at what. And for me, my skill is in running really fast. I can run into problems quickly. I can figure them out quickly. I can make decisions quickly. But once I move through it, I am not the dude to colonize that space, right? Because I want to move on to the next field. So I need people that are more stable. And I tell people that, like, what I'm really good at is running fast. But what I need is someone to walk slowly behind me to help me. And that's what I did, is I cultivated people who walk slowly behind me, and they're every bit as critical as I am. I'm not better or worse. It's together we form a team. I can't do what I do, and they can't do what I do, and I can't do what they do. So together we form really, we're the soil food web, but we're the human web.
Right. That's a great way of putting it, Kev. Mm-hmm. Great way of putting it. And she's one of our regulars, so I'm sure she's going to appreciate those wise words.
It's genuine, man. We're all valuable. Never sell yourself short. You're good at something, and those skills are always valuable at the right moment. And so when you put the right people around you, you're able to feel important too, and it's a lovely feeling to be part of something together. Like, winning alone is okay, but winning with friends is better.
Yeah, winning as a team is way better. Yeah. Hey, and I saw Toad was in the chat. Hey, Mr. Toad, if you'd like to come on and bring us up to speed on what Kev passed along to you, please reach out. We'd love to have you on and learn more about it.
Oh shit, man! Toad's someone that I look up to.
Dude, he's a fucking trooper, man.
He's a soldier, but he's a brilliant guy, and he's always been unbelievably open with the information
and positive.
No matter what's happened to him or what's occurred, the kid never ever backs the fuck up an inch, and I respect him. But I think he's a brilliant dude, and he's somebody that I like to listen to him talk, because he tries to put actionable things together for people so people succeed. And I love that. I love to see people trying to support other people, and he doesn't take any shit from anybody. And I love that too, right? Because our world is aggressive and they beat people down because they
All right, Toad.
they don't want to see anybody shine. So shine on, baby.
All right. Ken, do we have his information? Because he's been on a long time ago. Might have been FCP. But if
I've got his information. I'll reach out. We actually had a show on this network with Mr. Toad. So yeah, I'll reach out and see if we can get him on. We're actually looking for a guest for next week. So I don't know, Kevin, you open for next week? Maybe we can get you and Tony on at the same time.
I'm taking off. We gonna laugh, but we found the old roadkill skunk.
Oh, really?
Took
okay.
24 years, Leighton, we hunted this thing, right? 24 years I've been hunting because I had a collection of them that got robbed from me by the man. And I said all these years, I said, I know it's somewhere, we'll find it. And the story is unbelievable on how this guy discovered it. And so we're all going to Maine, a whole crew of us, and we'll be there next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all together as a group. I'm bringing in scientists and reviewers and all these individuals to celebrate the discovery of something that's just been lost. And I have nothing to do with it other than I got brought in to help the guy really, how do you do this correctly? Because it's not so much just about you found a skunk, but it's about how do we understand the molecules that create such an incredible volatility and diffusion in aroma? And can we learn from that molecular format and instill it into other plants? How do we take the knowledge and actually improve it's called the osmocosm. It's the world of aroma. How do we improve the osmocosm if we have reference to begin with? And now we have all this science to help us. And so for me, man, I'm just really excited. Like 24 years we hunted and finally we find it. But it wasn't me that found it. It was someone else. And it's a beautiful story. We're going to release the whole thing. But shit, if you guys want to zoom in, I'll hit you up. We can zoom in and say hi to the crew while we're all there at the spot. We got Rob Clark's going to zoom in from Switzerland. We got Mojave's going to come by. We got all these people flying into Maine just so they can be part of it. So that I said, listen, I can validate it myself. I don't need anybody to help me with selling plants, but I would love to get a lot of people together to say, look, you've never experienced an aroma that carves through a wall.
Yep.
Here it is.
So
your truck driving down the road, you're in trouble.
It's going to be wicked, man. Yeah, that's the shit you can't hide. I'm not available. I won't be around, but in the future I'm down and I'll zoom into you guys so you can just swing in and just say hi to the group because everybody would love to see your face.
So can you tell us what town in Maine?
Yeah, it's in Old Maine. So we're flying into the Bangor airport, right? And so we're going to miss the massive snowstorm, thankfully. But we fly into the Bangor airport. We take off. Me and my boy Alex take off Wednesday. We fly out Thursday morning. I'll be there Thursday in the evening, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then, like I said, I get some scientists from MIT coming in that are aroma specialists. We got other sciences that are, genomics that are going to zoom in. So a bunch of people coming in live, and then a bunch of people were zooming in, just so that what we can do is we can start to really understand things that we talk about this all the time. The aroma that used to chew through a wall could penetrate, travel hundreds of yards. And everyone thinks it's like some kind of distant memory that I'm senile. And I'm like, no, until we find it, we can't talk about it, but we got it. And so now what it does, it lets us start to talk. And then what I did is I had him take it for wash. It had never been washed. And it's washing at like 6.5 points, right? So it's just shedding resin. It's gorgeous, big heads. And so we had it washed, so then we'll have temple ball, sift, and rosin to be able to assess along with the flower. And it'll allow everybody just to really, hang out at the house. I had guys on LinkedIn that were talking to me about some shit. And I said, look, I don't know you, but I know you're a New England farmer. Why don't you come join us and just hang out and chill at the spot and play around with stuff you haven't seen? And so it's just more of a celebration because everything that's good in cannabis becomes like hoarded and hoed out, and then all the special people. And I'm like, cannabis to me is the opposite of that. Like my whole approach was always to share the material. Like we can all make money, but being a prick doesn't benefit anybody, right? Not in the long game. And so with this one, I said, look, man, you can all come in, and if you got negative reviews, you think you hate it, it's fine. That you're welcome to do as you choose. So that what we have is we have true opinions of what was something that reflected this era. The story's amazing. The guy went to prison for cultivation. He gets out of prison and has to get a job, because you always got to get a job when you're done getting arrested, right? So he has to get a job, and he gets a job cleaning out warehouses and storehouses. And he finds in a drawer, a little jar that says 87 skunk, and he puts it in his pocket, and he cracks it down the road. All the seeds don't germ but one, and the one that popped out is that plant.
Damn.
It's a beautiful story, and he's a lovely guy, and he didn't even know what he had. He didn't have any idea that this was what it was. He's using it, and he's the only person that has the plant. He's using it to feed his little cancer program. He has a little tiny storefront that he feeds a cancer program from, and it's all this beautiful goodwill. He's a soil wizard. He figured out how to change the soil through soil manipulation to keep driving the metabolites higher and higher and higher and higher until he finally got this thing just explode. And it's this beautiful story of a real cultivator trying to understand how to work with the plant that just blew his mind when he saw it. How does he improve it? How does he stabilize the process? And lo and behold, this guy, Charles Stockstill, goes to work with him and hits me on the phone and says, Kev, we got something in our hands that's insane. And if I told you how much money got offered for the cut already in cash, you would believe it. You would not believe how much money we've already been offered for the cut, just a cut in cash. So that's not what we want to do. We want to do some intelligent shit with it. And part of it is, for me, really is to be able to better understand how do you research and study aroma at that level, so that we can better breed and create cannabis that also has a resonance like that. It's not to put the skunk in all the plants. It's to understand, how do we make plants, if possible, produce.
How do we make them loud?
How do we make them loud and have a resonance that stays within the room for 2 or 3 days after you took the herb out of the jar? Right? Like that. Like I've been talking to people for years, and I've heard every story. It's, some scientists are trying to tell me, it's because you didn't dry it right. If you had dried it right, it wouldn't have that. So I said, let me get this straight. We're in 2026. We got every fucking scientist on earth. So you're going to tell me that you guys can't figure out how to fuck up the dry and get it to smell again? I said, so if it was that simple, wouldn't we be doing that? Right? So I'm laughing. I'm like, I don't think you catch it, because I realize they haven't, because the last time any of us really saw these aromas was around, early 2000, 202, 203. By 204, it was gone. And I went on this hunt around the world to get it, and it created all this online fucking brawl about who was the king of fucking skunk and shit. I'm like, look, I'm just trying to say I'm hunting something I can't find. And I correlate it to Mel Fisher hunting the Atoche, where he knew that fucking wreck went down in Florida. Everyone told him he was an idiot. And he said, no, I know it exists somewhere. I'm going to find it. And 22 fucking years later, he pulls up $400 million in gold, and he says, all right, looks like we found it. That's what I believe too, was that it wasn't going to be somebody who was going to breed it. It was somebody who was going to discover old stock that had been preserved, and they just didn't know they had it. And I just got lucky that the guy who worked with them knew me and called me, and I went to help the guy out. I said, listen, let me just help you so you don't get fucked, because you will get fucked in cannabis with something like this. And so we worked together for like a month and a half, 2 months, me just trying to help him understand the nuances of what you could really do with this. And he just said, hey, I would love if you were my partner on the project. And I said, well, I'm helping you right now. He goes, no, I mean like partner. Like if you were my partner, I think it would be better. So I said, if you down, I'm down, let's go. And so now we're all locked in and we're about to go. So I brought a tribe of people in so that we could celebrate the discovery, but also celebrate Kirk's story, where to me, it's a story of redemption, man. You get screwed, your life gets fucked up, and you overcome the problem. And in the process, you find something that opens up.
Get rewarded.
Yeah, pathway forward. And he's a great guy. He couldn't be any nicer. And Charles was such a good dude about the whole process too, where he's like, Kev, he goes, I just don't want to make a mistake. I'm part of the project. I want to be involved. He goes, but if we just could have you help us understand little nuances, it would be better. And it just caught me because everybody's trying to do the right thing. And to me, it's the best part of real cannabis is that it's gentle. It's the opposite of the society we live in today, right? So for me, it's a story of redemption, but it's not my redemption, it's his. And I just get to be part of it. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. So I'll zoom you guys in, man. You'll be able to come in and say what's up.
Oh,
I'd love to introduce you, Leighton, because he's a phenomenal soil builder and he wants to start doing some seminars at his spot. And I said, next year you could put him on and bring people in about how he created the stuff and what he does. And just small scale, just because he really loves what he does, but you'd be a great introduction to you. He would be somebody that would be wonderful for your show.
Beautiful. Love it, dude. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And yeah, you know, we ran over a little bit, but Kev, I really appreciate you giving us 2 hours plus of your time. I know you got a lot going on. You're a busy guy. And at some point in the future, Ken, you need to introduce him to Andy. Andy has some seeds from Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, from like 25 years ago. And
oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, make the connect. I'd love to just even chat.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like I said, everybody wants your shit, but I'm just like, I like the people.
No, but dude, you're the guy to get this out because, you know, he saved these genetics. They're special.
Yeah, no, we can whatever he wants to do, we can do. And if he just wants some advice on how to operate, that's cool too. Like my thing is, man, cannabis is one of those places where goodwill gets burned and it hurts people and it screws them up and it's just like it steals from them the joy of being involved. So whatever I can do to support him, that's great. Even it's just simple of just turning him on to access to do whatever he needs to do. So feel free.
Awesome.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for having me on. Always good to see you, Ken. Always good to see you, Leighton. And thanks to the audience for being part of the show and being part of my community. It's always been a lot to me. So thank you very much.
Amen to that. And Ken, as always, thanks for all the behind the scenes that you spend to make this happen every week. And you know, thank you again, Ken.
Anytime, baby. Anytime.
All right,
guys. We'll end the show.
All right.
Peace out, everybody.